Hello, beautiful people. Um, I have heard a few people I really respect recently talking in a way I didn't feel was particularly helpful. I know that some of you will disagree with this video. Some of you might disagree very strongly, but I wanted to voice my thoughts anyway. So many witches believe in reincarnation, in coming back in a different form after death. For some, the belief of retribution is a part of this, so not learning a lesson, not fulfilling a task, doing something away from your path. For some, the explanation would be that if you are suffering now, you've done something wrong in a previous life. Now, personally, I feel whether or not this is true is irrelevant to the part of the conversation that I'm having, and it's not what I have the problem with, but that will be addressed later. What I take issue with is how this affects our responses to people who are hurting, who are in danger, who are suffering abuse or neglect or persecution, or are, trying desperately to come out of that and are stuck in a cycle. I believe we need to be very careful before we talk about retribution and previous lives, even current lives. And I think that many people have seen that actually in the church, because I know that, for example, my husband, who had cancer as a teenager, his mother sought some support from a Catholic priest who told her that she and her husband had clearly sinned and therefore told my husband her son had ended up with serious cancer. You can see how unhelpful that is to someone in that situation. Now, if you are in or have come out of an abusive situation, if you have just lost a child, if you have a mental illness or you've been raped, you are very unlikely to hear that wrongs in a previous life have caused this. You're very unlikely to hear that in a positive manner. What you may already believe is that you're an awful person. What you may already believe is that you deserved all you got because that's what you've been told daily or for a long time by your abuser. For those in that situation, they are likely to hear wrongs in a previous life as a confirmation of those feelings of worthlessness. Perpetuating those feelings helps no one and is not holding space, in my book, or creating a sacred area for someone to develop and grow away from this insidious belief that they are bad. Even if you are telling someone they can move away from it, they're unlikely to hear that part. And we can talk about asking for forgiveness or the benefits of prayer or, raising your vibration, however you want to put it, without focusing on how they just didn't cut it in a previous life, whether or not that is part of your belief. Alongside this, I have heard people talk about having no room to sit with people in their pity, about, they have no room to talk about, they talk about people needing to just work it out for themselves and say that until they can get to a better space where they're ready to accept they didn't fulfill whatever it was in a previous life, or cause pain to others in a previous life, then they essentially do not have time for them. I've heard people talk about themselves being sullied by this person's pity, or saying if they spend time with them, then they will be sucked in by the pain and pity of the other person. I've heard people saying it will deplete them or take away some of their vital spirit. For me, this breaks my heart. It's just wrong. And yes, there are times you may have to distance yourself from someone. You may have to break off a friendship or family relation. You may find yourself in a place where supporting them isn't helping either of you. There are people you have to walk away from to help yourself, and everybody also has different limits and different abilities to cope. However, this should not be some clear-cut decision where every person who is currently in pain and pitying themselves is someone you avoid. Firstly, everyone, all of us, me, you, everybody, my 3-year-old son has caused someone pain. whether they meant to or not, and that is unfortunately the nature of human life. Everyone has had someone cause them pain, and that also, you know, happens in human life. There are varying levels of this, and because we are all so different and we all live in different situations, we all have different abilities to cope. So yes, including forgiveness for the pain that you've caused, or the wrongs you've done, or the lessons you haven't learned in a prayer, if you pray and believe that is fine, and it's something everybody can do. However, there's no need to focus on that point. And telling people they were rubbish in their past lives isn't helpful, because it puts people off who need the most love and the most support from others. I've seen it happen, and I've seen it work the other way, where it causes people to be smug about a relatively easy life, and because of that, they end up causing pain to others. Yes, I've been the person who couldn't find the way out of pain. I still struggle with stuff. However, the reason it truly hurts me is nothing to do with me. It's because of the people I know and have known who have been or are the people who are stuck in a cycle of pity, of self-despair, of hatred. When someone is stuck in that cycle, it doesn't change overnight. Often these are people who've never had someone stable to love them, who have never been fortunate enough to have a comfortable life or feel safe. And it makes me rage inside when I hear person after person saying that they don't have time for someone who is in that place of self-hatred, of self-despair, of pity. And of course, they are stuck in the cycle for years. They have had years of abuse or pain. Yes, of course, that means that it takes a bloody long time. And one person I know was nearly burnt alive as a child by their mother. They were told they were worthless, they were neglected, they were exposed to drugs and alcohol, and then they were raped repeatedly on top of this. And why on earth should I expect this beautiful person to simply say, oh, okay, yeah, I'll break out the cycle and start loving myself, and, you know, I'll also ask for forgiveness while I'm at it. And I appreciate not everyone is in a place themselves to help. I appreciate that when you give years of your life to someone who you've given every possible help to, and they just don't get better, you end up having to break it off. And this video is not aimed at those people, and I completely respect decisions made like that, with real thought and real feeling. But I do have to ask, if everyone refuses point blank to sit with these people in their pain, if everyone says they need to avoid them because that person's pity will just drag them down, then how can the person break out the cycle? Yes, you can argue that it's always within the self to recover, that you have to find it in yourself to pull yourself out, you know, and you do. However, human nature is social. We are social creatures. Our relationships are a crucial part of the way we develop, the way we relate to the world, the way we can understand and interpret our world. Okay, we have all heard about the orphanages in places like Romania where there was no bonding, and how much damage it caused to those children's minds. When the mind is put through trauma, it has different responses and ways of protecting itself. One way after severe and often repeated trauma is dissociative identity disorder, or DID, where the mind splits into several personalities to keep part of the person safe and sacred. Now, that is really an amazing mechanism. Whether you view things spiritually, or whether you see it purely as a mental health response. One moment, my son's calling me. So DID, or dissociative identity disorder, is often confused with schizophrenia, which tends to be genetic and is a breakdown where the person struggles to relate emotions, thoughts, behaviour, and experiences psychosis such as hearing voices, visual hallucinations, delusions. Maybe, a famous one is believing that you are God or a saint, or and they become unable to perceive reality in the way that everyone else, in the reality that everyone else perceives. Now, so those are two different things. Those who have experienced trauma may respond physically by consistently being in fight or flight mode, or this mode may be really easily activated, so it only takes a comment or a smell and they're right in fight or flight mode. Their body is releasing that adrenaline, it's getting ready to run. This is the body and mind responding together to past experience, and with a lot of work we can often improve this, but often there will need to be that outside person who intervenes to allow the person who experienced trauma to realize that they need to work on this. They personally may not be able to recognize it because they've lived with it for a long time, because it's the body's way of making sure you're ready to save yourself because of the dangerous situation that you were in, in your past. It's the body telling us we are in danger, and it's difficult to override without being shown how to, which usually includes another person showing us how. We all know about serotonin and depression, very well known now. However, there are so many different chemicals in the brain that affect the way we think, we speak, we behave, we feel, how we perceive the world around us, in the body and brain. These chemicals are not just affected by medication, okay, but they're affected by our behavior, by our thought patterns, by contact with animals, and most importantly, by human contact. Think about oxytocin, the hormone produced in one instance to help parents, particularly mothers, and babies bond. It's released in labour. It's also released for the mother with nipple stimulation, which is human touch. Studies have been done to show that the huge differences in children with attachment or behavioural disorders demonstrate how being in a family and holding and touching them consistently, often as part of the therapy, can lead to huge improvements in their behaviour and their emotional state. Also, for abused and neglected children, it's noted that nurturing them as you would a younger child, so spoon feeding, rocking, singing to them, can help. The child may be at a younger emotional age because of lack of positive human interaction, because of their lack of loving relationships. Right, apologies for that. I keep being interrupted by my family today. So children can still be at much younger emotional ages because of their experiences. So it doesn't end at children. Many adults who have gone through traumatic events as children and are trapped within this cycle of pain and self-abuse are also experiencing life from the perspective of a younger child. Their own emotional age is still young. Expecting them to behave as a well-rounded adult could is often pointless because they can't. There is a lot of talk about walking away from people, and it can take a lot of strength to do that. It can break your heart. And I've had to make that decision. And my heart goes out to people who've done that with true respect for others and for themselves. Sorry, I'm getting totes emotional here. It is true that we cannot help everyone. However, I've seen firsthand people overcome huge issues and break free of a truly horrific cycle of self-pity, of self-abuse and despair when they are given a stable and loving relationship with healthy boundaries and consistency, long-term consistency. I have seen people who have had wonderful childhoods end up in abusive situations and take years to break free. But the breaking free happened when somebody listened, when they realised they could be loved and supported elsewhere. When the person on the outside sat with them again and again while they wept and consistently told them they did have the strength to leave. I've seen people be tormented by a mental illness for 20 years and finally move out of its grip. There isn't the need to put negative feelings in someone's head at that point. Later, once they've broken free, maybe to talk, to raise that conversation. But The being there is the most important thing. You know, of course, if you believe that forgiveness will help, you can encourage that, but you don't even need to specify that it's for past lives. Just, you know, anyway. Empath is always a hot word in this community, but empathy is not just about feeling someone else's pain. Whereas sympathy is feeling sorry for somebody, empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Someone really wise once told me that sympathy is seeing someone stuck in a hole and jumping in to cry with them. Empathy is throwing in a rope, pulling them out, and giving them a hug afterwards. Empathy is not just to make ourselves seem wonderful online. And I think that I have seen it used that way, you know. We can actually use empathy to truly help others, rather than using it as an excuse not to associate with them. If you claim to be a witch, then put protections around yourself before going in. Use the magic you have and the energy you can manipulate to stop your ability to feel so deeply being such a negative thing. There's plenty of videos on, you know, protecting yourself as an empath, and take time to self-care as well as sitting with others. Make sure you have boundaries. Don't hurt yourself helping. Take your power and use it positively to keep you strong. Ask your spirits for guidance, help, protection. If you don't believe in that, consult cards, repeat mantras, do whatever you do. Because if you've got it in yourself to help yourself and move yourself along positively, you've got the ability to do that for other people and to protect yourself at the same time. You know, it's normal and natural that we feel sad after talking to someone who tells us about an awful experience. It is a good thing that we can do that. It's okay to take some time out to make sure you make the time to keep yourself feeling strong. It's how we are. That is empathy, you know. And really, it is partly up to you whether or not you allow yourself to be dragged down into somebody else's cycle of self-pity. You can still sit with them and love them without being dragged down. But in my book, knowing what we do about the human mind and the body's responses, to start preaching to people that are simply not able to be in a place to break out the cycle right now, that they did something negative in a previous life and this is their retribution, is just not helpful. And it's not creating a healing space for them. Saying you don't have room to sit with people in the cycle of self-abuse is not helpful. Discussing these things should be done carefully, and really it is almost impossible to discuss retribution in such an open space, which YouTube is, because some of these things just need to be discussed face to face. And I think the temptation can be that when we have a strong belief within ourselves, you know, we do, even accidentally, put that belief on other people. And no matter how much we believe it, if it's not going to help them at that point, what is the point of putting it on them? What is the point? You know, I would rather be someone who can create sacred space that appreciates the reality of how the human mind works to protect itself. I do not want to start suggesting that the abused toddler who was finally killed by his parents was a murderer or abuser in a previous life, because I don't see the room for progression in that conversation. I just don't. So I will continue to sit with many of those in cycles of self-despair and pity, which I do offline, but I'm happy to do it online as well, in the hope that some of them will find the strength and ability to break free and walk into self-love. Yes, darling. Right, I love you guys. Okay. I love you guys, and I will speak to you soon. Mwah.